Destiny 2 released on September 6, 2017, however, you'll never be able to play that same game again. Even if you purchased the game at launch and never opened your copy, you still can't play the launch version of Destiny 2. I'm not talking about simple patches, bug fixes, balance passes, or even DLC. The game you purchased on that disc no longer exists in a functional state. Destiny 2 is still playable today, but the majority of the content that you would have experienced at launch was removed from the game on November 10th, 2020. The most notable deletion is the key selling point of the title, the Red War story campaign. You could assemble a fully featured video game from the content that was removed alone. This is the story of that Destiny 2, the Destiny 2 you can never play again. Live service games have many benefits, like the ability to support a game for years after release with new content and updates, and as a source of steady income for the developer. However, they also have serious drawbacks. Destiny 2 developer Bungie ran into one of the biggest in 2020. The game had received regular updates and new content over the course of 3 years, and boasted far more content than Destiny 1 ever received in its 3-year cycle. Having recently broken up with their publisher Activision, the newly independent Bungie decided to continue supporting Destiny 2 as a live service, with new expansions and seasons, rather than developing a standalone third game. The development of the planned 2020 expansion, Beyond Light, made many of the problems with this idea evident. The game's file size was becoming unsustainable for the PS4 and Xbox One. It was one of the largest games ever released at that point. They had also planned to make technical upgrades to Destiny's engine for Beyond Light, but this had the potential to break legacy content and would require significant development time to fix. If they wanted to keep the entirety of Destiny 2 playable and use the upgraded engine for Beyond Light, Bungie would essentially need to port all old content to the upgraded engine. It would essentially be like building them from scratch. Additionally, all new updates to the game have a potential to break legacy content. The more legacy content that exists in a game, the more potential there is for bugs each time you add a new feature. This makes development more expensive, as each new patch comes with increasing costs due to how much has been stacked on top of old content. Not having a publisher anymore, Bungie didn't have the same level of resources as when they were backed by Activision, who had supported development with 2 of their subsidiary development studios, Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios. As a result, Bungie only ported the content that they thought players would replay the most in the future, and left the rest of the game on the cutting room floor. Making the situation even worse was that significant portions of Destiny 2 and its downloadable content had been developed by Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios. Following the 2019 breakup, developers from those studios were no longer working on the game, meaning Bungie was left to fix things their developers had not created. I don't have game development experience, but I do have some limited programming experience. In my personal experience, it's incredibly easy to forget exactly how a program you wrote works if you don't document why and how you created it. Deciphering how code someone else wrote works is a Herculean task if they didn't document their work, the challenge increasing exponentially with each layer of complexity. A dense and complicated project like a AAA video game is difficult to manage even in the best of circumstances, as you may have hundreds of people contributing to the code base. I don't have insight into exactly what happened behind the scenes at Bungie, so these arguments are inherently speculative. However, I think these factors probably contributed to the decision-making regarding vaulting content in 2020. Faced with a limited ability to keep legacy content playable while also developing new releases, Bungie made the controversial decision to remove certain legacy content from Destiny 2. The following content was no longer playable after the release of Beyond Light: the Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind campaigns, the Titan, Io, Mercury, and Mars patrol zones, Leviathan plus its raid layers, Scourge of the Past, Crown of Sorrow, all adventures, all seasonal content prior to Beyond Light, and some quests involving aforementioned content. Destiny 2 was absolutely gutted by these changes, with the number of major story campaigns cut from 5 to 3, patrol zones from 9 to 7, and raids from 7 to 3. More content was eventually removed with the release of Witch Queen, but I'm going to focus on the initial round of sunsetting in this video. Many players were rightfully outraged as they'd paid for the content and expected to be able to continue playing it. This practice, called sunsetting or content vaulting, was perfectly legal as many games or other commercial software have explicit language in their terms of service that say that you're not guaranteed perpetual access to the content you purchase. Given that you had to agree to the TOS in order to play Destiny 2, everyone had technically agreed to sunsetting whether or not they actually read the terms of service or not. Most TOS documents are written in complex legalese that most lay people have difficulty understanding, so in most cases people just agree without reading. Under US law, where Bungie is located, a contract you sign is enforceable even if you didn't read the full thing, so Bungie was within their legal right to sunset that content. However, just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right. I personally believe that ensuring at least limited access to old software or media should be required under law. This is complicated by the fact that Destiny 2 is an always online video game that cannot be played without access to Bungie servers, so it would be complex and likely expensive to allow players to play old versions of Destiny 2 content, even if a limited offline version was created in a separate file from the live game. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand the implications of what would be required in the case of Destiny 2, however, I think at least trying to create a separate version of Destiny 2 where sunset content people paid for was still playable, even if it was in a limited fashion, would have saved Bungie from most of the backlash and loss of trust. The positive player sentiment would probably have made the resources required at least somewhat worth it, but again, Bungie likely considered this option and chose not to, so I don't know exactly what pros and cons would be involved. I personally would pay for the opportunity to play the vaulted campaigns and seasonal stories today, even if the experience was significantly limited. I will acknowledge this is because I didn't pay for them in the first place. I would be pretty angry if I'd paid for those expansions only to have them taken away years later, and I would be incensed if I was asked to pay for them a second time to maintain access. I don't blame anyone who quit Destiny after large portions of the game they paid for were taken away from them. Removing paid gameplay content from a live service video game isn't unique to Destiny and has become increasingly common in recent years. However, just because something is common practice doesn't mean we have to accept it. If enough people disagree and make their voices heard, it eventually will stop happening. I want to make it clear though, I am not calling for people to boycott Bungie or harass their employees. Harassment is never okay because Bungie developers are people with their own lives and feelings. Boycotts are incredibly effective at causing change if enough people participate in good faith. Many people play games to forget about their problems for a while, so I understand why people are hesitant to boycott their source of comfort media or entertainment. I myself have a complicated relationship to that idea. I personally believe that video games are an art form that should be preserved for future generations to appreciate. Imagine if you weren't able to read a classic novel or watch a movie that significantly impacted our culture because the creators ordered all copies destroyed after a few years. This has actually happened throughout history. The most famous example is the re-release of the Star Wars original trilogy, and the incredible difficulty of finding an unmodified copy of the 1977 film version of Star Wars. For decades now, it's been incredibly difficult to watch the version of Star Wars that won 7 Academy Awards and had a major impact on Western pop culture. It revolutionized the science fiction genre in the 1970s, and now you can only watch the version that George Lucas has re-edited dozens of times in the ensuing decades. More recently, streaming platforms have been removing TV shows and movies that have never been released in physical media as a cost-cutting measure, making them unavailable for anyone to watch legally. Shutting down old games, especially always online titles, or making certain content unplayable in perpetuity is effectively the same practice. At the very least, if you don't want to put any more financial resources toward maintaining old games and software, you can release the source code under some kind of non-commercial open source license, allowing hobbyists to preserve that history for you. It amounts to the destruction of culture hundreds of people worked hard to create, and that countless more enjoy, appreciate, and are influenced by. Many people dedicate dedicate their lives to create and consume art, and video games are no different in this respect. Making it impossible to legally access media that has already received a release is tantamount to book burning. We have already lost entire centuries of culture due to the destruction of art in authoritarian societies. It used to be unheard of for the very people who published those works to be the ones burning them. We should never tolerate these practices because preserving human culture and art helps future generations understand their ancestors. One day, we will all be gone, and any stories that we didn't preserve will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Yes, I would argue that the preservation of humanity, our memories, and the art we create is a central theme of Blade Runner. I fully acknowledge that it may sound a bit hyperbolic to make this argument about Sunset Destiny 2 campaigns, but I'm being fully earnest with you here. I wholeheartedly believe media preservation is incredibly important, and think it should extend to video games, many of which historically have been lost to time. Now that I've explained exactly why I'm making this video, let's discuss what you've been seeing on screen. 4 years ago, I upgraded my computer. Because I didn't want to sift through a lot of old files at the time, I decided to buy a new SSD and keep my old boot drive in a box so that I could plug it back into my computer and go through the files at a later date. Because I was going through some personal issues at the time, I completely forgot about this drive and didn't discover it until 4 years later when I moved to a new apartment. I plugged the SSD into my computer a few weeks ago and found it full of old files I didn't know I still had. On the drive was 26 hours of Destiny 2 gameplay that I recorded in early October 2019, within days of the launch of Destiny 2 on Steam. The footage contains my entire experience with Destiny 2 A New Light, the free-to-play version of the game from 2019. As part of the Steam release, all Year 1 content, including the Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind campaigns, became free to all players. I played through a large portion of that free-to-play content over the course of 2 weeks, which was accidentally preserved on my SSD until now. I remember loving the game, but ultimately stopped playing shortly afterwards because I didn't have friends willing to play Destiny 2 with me at the time, and a lot of endgame content requires teammates. It's ironic that I fell back in love with the Destiny franchise in the intervening 4 years, and now have a much greater appreciation for the game than I ever did when I recorded this gameplay back in 2019. I've never shown these videos to anyone before today, so you're some of the first to witness my New Light experience. It's probably why the gameplay is shockingly bad in places, but that jank is part of the appeal to me. It shows what Destiny 2 was like for someone trying the game immediately after it went free to play in 2019, and has the unintended consequence of displaying a large amount of currently Sunset story content. One thing that's evident from the gameplay is that Destiny 2 A New Light was a convoluted experience. Within the first 20 minutes, I created a new character, a hunter, awoke in the Cosmodrome, and found my way to the tower. This compressed the first couple of missions of Destiny 1 into a short 10-minute experience that introduces new players to the Destiny universe. Next, a cutscene played designed to fill players who skipped Destiny 1 in on the basic premise of the franchise. I was already familiar with the premise based on playing Destiny 1 5 years earlier in 2014. After my refresher, I was sent to the tower to learn about the Vanguard. A lot of information was thrown at me in a short period of time, which I remember feeling quite overwhelming. Upon recovering, I was told to travel to the EDZ to meet Devrim K and receive a sparrow for the first time. The quest then directed me to explore the area where I completed a few lost sectors and adventures. The next several hours of my gameplay experience was patrol zone content. I would complete quests on one planet, then unlock the next after an hour or two. Each planet unlocked in the order I would have visited them through the various campaigns had I played them in chronological order. However, the quests and content I was playing here were not campaign content, and instead were supplemental mid- or post-campaign content. This made the experience confusing because I experienced a lot of things out of order, missing the campaigns that were designed to introduce me to each location, and instead playing miscellaneous quests, Crucible, and Gambit. After visiting every patrol zone available in the game, including the Moon, which forced me to play the first mission of Shadowkeep, the newest expansion at the time, it was clear to me that I was missing something. From my experience in Destiny 1, I knew there were campaign missions somewhere that I was missing, and the game had more to offer than patrol zone content. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed my time exploring the patrol zones, particularly Mars because I loved Escalation Protocol, but it's not quite the same as playing a fully fleshed out story campaign experience. After searching around for a while and even looking through the Destiny 2 store, I googled it and found my way to Amanda Holliday, who gave me the quests for the Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind campaigns. Putting the free-to-play campaigns at Amanda Holliday and not directing new players to this content immediately was a huge mistake. I enjoyed the Patrol Zone content, but it led to me discovering things out of the original order they were designed for when the campaigns were built. It made the New Light experience feel extremely disjointed and confusing. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense that I failed to fall fully head over heels in love with Destiny 2 because I didn't experience the content in the order developers handcrafted the narrative for. In particular, I think the Red War suffered the most from this. To a new player, the quest tab is incredibly overwhelming and lacks organization, and doesn't provide a good direction on what content to do first. Guardian ranks somewhat remedy this problem today, but still don't adequately address the problem. Back in 2019, there weren't Guardian ranks, so I ended up accidentally playing Curse of Osiris first, then the Red War, then finally Warmind. I'm going to talk about these expansions in chronological order rather than the order I played them in because it will make more sense that way. The opening mission of the Red War sees the Vanguard's early warning systems fail after intervention by the Nine. The Red Legion attacks the last city and overwhelms their defenses for the first time in history, forcing the Vanguard into a retreat. Their arrival pays off an open narrative thread from the Taken King, where the Cabal called for reinforcements from Tor Bottle after their defeat at the hands of Oryx in the Taken War. This sets the Red War up as a direct sequel to the Taken King rather than Rise of Iron, a choice that makes more sense once you learn that most Bungie developers went from working on the Taken King directly to development of Destiny 2, while a small team remained on Destiny 1 creating Rise of Iron and Age of Triumph. This unintentionally makes the events of Rise of Iron feel strangely unaddressed in Destiny 2, which likely happened due to their parallel development. It's a little bit sad because Rise of Iron is my favorite Destiny 1 expansion by far. The opening mission during the initial Red Legion invasion of the last city is very clearly set up as a tutorial for Destiny 2. It introduces the player to basic game mechanics like shooting and crouching. For this reason, the player should have been shepherded to the first mission directly after receiving a ship in the Cosmodrome and flying to the tower. This would establish the Red War as the first thing most Destiny 2 players would experience, which is how it was originally designed back in 2017. The New Light experience would be dramatically bolstered by this change because the Red War was a fantastic onboarding experience that gradually introduces gameplay mechanics, enemy factions, and planets of the solar system to the player as the story progresses. The entire plot of the Red War is about regrouping outside the city in various places across the solar system, rallying and fighting off the Red Legion. Fragmenting the narrative and allowing the player to explore locations before experiencing them naturally through the Red War campaign destroys a lot of the narrative momentum the Red War campaign has. I think Bungie didn't force players into the campaign first because they wanted New Lights to be able to hop in and play with their friends right away. The problem with this approach is the player won't have any good loot unless they complete one of the campaigns, making it difficult to play with friends and do meaningful activities with them unless you play through the campaign first. Thus, it makes way more sense for the Red War to naturally onboard the player to the game and then give the player freedom to do whatever they want after they defeated Gaul and finished the campaign. Most games make players do their story campaign first for good reasons. A well-designed story campaign is designed to onboard the player to all of the gameplay systems by gradually teaching them new mechanics as they progress, and building mastery by slowly increasing the difficulty as the story continues. If the developer doesn't know what order players are going to experience content in, they can't build in a natural progression. It's going to cause difficulty spikes and drop-offs. This can lead to a frustrating player experience, as it seems arbitrary why some things are more difficult than others. Ripping the Red War out of Destiny 2 caused the greatest problem this game has ever seen by destroying the new player experience and failing to replace it with something of equivalent quality. The current new player experience is abysmal compared to what the Red War offers. The Guardian tries to stop Gaul, but the Almighty encases the Traveler and cuts off all Guardian's connections to the light. Driving home the main theme of the campaign, Gaul says Guardians don't deserve the light before defeating the Guardian and kicking them off his ship. What follows is my favorite sequence in Destiny history. The Guardian escapes the last city but is severely weakened without the light. They walk through the outskirts of the city and see the corpses of dead Guardians defeated by the Red Legion, unable to use the light to defend themselves. This is underscored by one of the greatest songs in Destiny history, Journey, written by Sky Lewin and Michael Salvatore, and performed by the Kronos Quartet. The song feels sad, but also hopeful. That combination of happy and sad just is devastating in the moment. The main melody is played by the string quartet, which is accompanied by percussion and a choir that gives the song an epic feeling and scope. I love Journey and think it embodies the idea of losing the light but persevering without it perfectly. Nolan North also has a fantastic performance as Ghost during this sequence. He sounds utterly broken and despairs having lost his connection to the Traveler. Journey hits so hard because it truly brings the Guardian to their lowest point so they can continue to rise to the occasion and fight back. Upon reaching the wilderness, the Guardian meets Hawthorne, a lightless civilian who's helping organize an evacuation from the city. The Guardian joins them and travels to the farm in the European Dead Zone where they regroup. Meanwhile, a cutscene reveals Gaul's goal to take the light. In the farm, the Guardian speaks to Cryptarch Tyra Karn, who seems to have forgotten the events of Rise of Iron where she met the Guardian for the first time. She blames it on losing her connection to the light, which seems to be Bungie's way of winking at the player and saying, yeah, we know you've met her before, but it still feels a bit jarring and weird if you've played Rise of Iron. My guess is that Bungie was trying to keep both possibilities open in case someone never played that expansion and doesn't yet know who she is, but it feels very strange and doesn't quite land for either possibility in my opinion. As is, Tyra is essentially a vehicle for exposition about the Shard of the Traveler, which is the next place the Guardian travels to. Apparently all Guardians have been dreaming of the Shard since their connection to the light was severed by Gaul, so it would make a lot more sense to have a dream sequence that establishes the Shard and compels the Guardian to seek it, rather than introducing it via Tyra. If the Guardian met her after finding the Shard and regaining the light, the notoriety of being the only Guardian to regain the light would carry the conversation and help it feel less awkward. The Guardian fights their way to the Shard, and Ghost is able to reconnect with the Traveler via the Shard, giving the Guardian their light back. I understand narratively why you regain the light so quickly and early in the campaign, but I kinda wish we had been without it for longer than one mission and one short sequence. It lessens the impact of being cut off from the Traveler and forced to fight for yourself without its help. From a new player gameplay perspective, it's a bit of a blessing to have missions without the light because it reduces the number of gameplay mechanics you need to learn and lets you focus on the gunplay aspect of Destiny before getting into abilities. It would have been a much more impactful redemption arc if there were a few more missions in the EDZ before regaining the light. As is, you lose and regain the light all within 45 minutes of starting the campaign, which severely lessens the impact of being humbled. This is a problem though because the narrative structure of the rest of the campaign is entirely based around the Guardian regaining the light immediately and serving as a spark of hope for the rest of the Vanguard. There's not a good way to rewrite the structure of the story to allow for a more substantial time without the light. The only thing that doesn't break future portions of the story is to introduce filler in the EDZ, which also wouldn't feel great either. Now that they have the light again, the Guardian hears a transmission from Zavala asking Guardians to regroup on Titan to make a plan to fight back against the Red Legion. Hawthorne is upset the Guardian wants to go to Titan because she doesn't have the light and wants all the help she can get with finding survivors and relocating them to the farm. She believes the Vanguard has abandoned humanity by fleeing to planets other than Earth, and she's kind of right. I like her character because she serves as the perfect balance to Vanguard leadership, who are stuck in their ways and are more focused on their loss of the light than helping the people around them. On Titan, Zavala's forces have been overrun by the Hive, so the Guardian helps them retake the arcology. Witnessing the Guardian and their light gives Zavala hope that the Red Legion can be defeated, so he and one of his commanders, Sloane, hatch a plot to intercept Cabal transmissions and crack their encryption to learn what they're planning. The Guardian travels deep into the arcology to find a Golden Age CPU to break the code. This attracts the attention of the Hive, so the Guardian commandeers a tank to escape. Tanks in Destiny have some of the worst controls of all time. The camera is on a separate axis from movement, so A and D rotate the camera while W and S move the tank forwards and backwards. It makes the controls feel incredibly stilted and awkward, as sometimes you need to press S to go the way your camera is pointing instead of backwards. It feels awful and unintuitive to drive. After using the CPU to crack the Red Legion's codes, Sloane discovers that the Red Legion has a ship called the Almighty that they use to destroy stars. Once Gaul extracts the Traveler from the system and takes the light, he plans to destroy the sun and consequently all the planets that orbit it. Angered by the threat, Zavala delivers a stirring speech about needing to gather all of the forces the Vanguard can muster in order to attack the Almighty, save the sun, and the Traveler. As always, Lance Reddick delivers a fantastic performance as Zavala. I'm very sad that he'll no longer play the character after his untimely passing. Lance was Zavala. He sends the Guardian to find Ikora and Cade so that everyone can rally and defeat Gaul. The Guardian travels to Nessus to find Cade 6. Cade has become trapped by the Vex inside their portal system on the Centaur, so the Guardian and a friendly AI named Failsafe work to rescue him. I quite like Failsafe, but I understand why some people don't. The character's constant bouncing between joyful and snarky but depressed is fun. She's struggling with her mental health, having been alone on Nessus for centuries, her personality having degraded to the point where she only has two affects: overly saccharine and sarcastically depressed. She oscillates between the two extremes, unable to regulate herself and find the middle ground. The concept of an AI that's struggling with human mental health problems is really endearing to me. It helps her feel incredibly lovable, probably because I heavily relate to her depressed affect. The Nessus portion of the campaign serves to provide some comic relief between the solemn first half and high-octane second half of the Red War. The Guardian rescues Cade and secures a Vex teleporter to allow for an assassination attempt on Gaul. Cade agrees to return to Zavala and says to check Io to find Ikora. The Guardian finds Ikora meditating over her loss in the last place the Traveler touched before the collapse, Io. Ikora lacks hope because she worries that without the light, Guardians will die if they try to stop the Cabal. She's afraid for her friends and fellow humans. After some time on Io, they discover the Red Legion was mining the Traveler's energy from the moon to try to take the light for themselves. Asher Mir helps Ikora and the Guardian investigate, where they realize that destroying the Almighty like Zavala plans would cause the destruction of the sun anyways. Upon learning this, Ikora travels to Zavala to try and stop his plan. I quite like the way the campaign divides the three Vanguard leaders and shows each coping with loss in their own way. Zavala is angry and plans to fight back. Cade copes through humor and tries to come up with an intricate plan. Ikora is afraid and seeks spiritual guidance from the Traveler. Each reaction is a perfectly human response to grief and loss, encapsulating the different reactions of each character. Grief, the central theme of the Red War, affects each person differently. Gaul took away their agency and made them feel small, which makes him one of the most imposing villains in Destiny history. This humanizes the Vanguard and shows that Guardians are not the invincible forces of nature Destiny often portrays them as. I love the theme that you can persevere through loss and grief. You can survive even if it seems hopeless. Even if you don't believe you'll succeed, you need to keep fighting because you've only truly lost when you've given up. Throughout the Red War, there are cutscenes where Gaul interrogates the speaker for the Traveler, trying to learn how to gain the light. The speaker believes it's impossible for a Cabal to be chosen by the Traveler because they've mythologized the Traveler as only choosing those who are devoted, brave, and willing to sacrifice themselves to protect humanity. Gaul's mentor ends up killing the speaker because he thinks it's a waste of time to try to wait to be blessed by the Traveler. He thinks it's better to take the light by force from the energy they mined on Io. Gaul kills his mentor for overstepping by killing the speaker. I quite like the Gaul cutscenes because they're well written. Gaul and the speaker trade verbal blows, speaking in monologues designed to convince the other they're wrong. It works well despite largely being scenes with two characters sitting in a room talking. The Vanguard unites at the farm and devises a plan to assault the city, disable the Almighty's weapons, teleport onto the Traveler, and free it from the Cabal prison to give everyone the light back. Hawthorne joins the fight and says that you don't need to be a guardian to be brave and protect the Traveler. This is essentially the thesis of the Red War. Guardians don't have a monopoly on courage, bravery, and sacrifice. You don't need the light or superpowers to help other people. Everyone can be a guardian, not just those who are blessed by the Traveler. It's a really good message. The Vanguard assaults the city while the Guardian sneaks aboard the Almighty. The next mission, 1AU, is incredible. You fight the Cabal on the Almighty as the sun looms large in the distance, completely taking up the entire sky. It makes the stakes feel intense and really feels like the climax of the story, even though it's not actually the final mission. After successfully disabling the Almighty without destroying it, the Guardian returns to the city and helps the Vanguard retake the tower. During this sequence, a reprised version of Journey plays, beautifully connecting the moment to the exile from the tower at the beginning of the campaign. It's perfect. In the final mission, the Guardian teleports to the surface of the Traveler to disable the machine suppressing it. Here they face Gaul in the final boss fight. After being backed into a corner and almost killed by the Guardian, Gaul drinks the light and it actually works, empowering him. Before he can kill the Guardian, the Traveler awakens and kills Gaul. This shows that the Traveler cares about who has the light and will punish anyone it deems unworthy, preventing them from using the power. In this way, the Traveler is judge, jury, and executioner, a divine being who watches and reserves the right to put a stop to anyone it thinks is wrong. Ending with a Deus Ex Machina is a bit of a cop-out and makes the theme of perseverance ring a bit hollow. I wish the Guardian and the Vanguard had delivered the final blow without the help of the Traveler, because they were the ones who fought and sacrificed, not the giant orb in the sky. The campaign ends with a speech from the speaker that he made before his death about the light being unable to be defeated. After the credits roll, a post-credits cutscene plays where the Traveler's burst of light is shown exiting the galaxy and hitting the Pyramid Fleet who's lurking in the intergalactic darkness. This foreshadows the arrival of the Black Fleet, something which wouldn't happen until Beyond Light, 3 years after the release of Destiny 2. The Red War is a very solid campaign that serves as the perfect introduction to Destiny 2. It, above all other content, is, I think, the biggest mistake not to keep in the game. It does an excellent job of onboarding new players and introducing them to the world of Destiny and the many factions involved. Each planet focuses on a single enemy species. The EDZ is the Fallen, Titan is the Hive, Nessus is the Vex, and Io is the Taken. The Red Legion, being the primary antagonists, are sprinkled throughout the entire system. It's such a shame that this onboarding experience was removed from Destiny 2. The current New Light campaign is nowhere near as impactful and helpful of a new player experience as the Red War was. Curse of Osiris would have made a lot more sense had I actually played it in chronological order. Instead, it was a confusing experience because I didn't know what happened in the Red War. Osiris is in the Infinite Forest and discovers the Vex have uncovered the ability to simulate light. He panics and tells Segura to leave the forest so that she won't be damaged by the Vex, but this inadvertently causes her to be injured during the escape. Meanwhile, the Guardian arrives at the lighthouse on Mercury. This is supposed to be the player's introduction to the planet, but I had already completed a bunch of adventures and lost sectors when I played the campaign, which undercut the mystery of arriving on Mercury. The Guardian finds Sagira and brings her to the lighthouse. Brother Vance tells them to bring her to the Temple of Osiris to heal her. Upon arriving there, the Guardian discovers the Vex have murdered Osiris's cult members. Thankfully, Ghost is able to use Vex technology to allow Sagira to share his shell temporarily. She then guides the Guardian into the Infinite Forest to help Osiris before he dies. This mission is designed to teach the player about the concept of the Infinite Forest. As you explore, the reflections of Osiris explain the history of Mercury and the creation of the forest. The Vex destroyed Mercury and converted it into a giant computer that they used to simulate timelines, attempting to find one with a particular outcome. The Vex want to discover the events that are required for them to destroy all life in the solar system, allowing them to harvest its resources. This also involves blowing up the sun. A Vex mind named Panoptes oversees the simulations, and the Traveler Reawakening has given them enough data to simulate the light for the first time, something the Vex were famously not able to do before. The concept of preventing the Vex from achieving their desired timeline is a compelling premise. It feels unique and also pays off elements of the story from the Vault of Glass and Destiny 1. Upon viewing Panoptes' desired future, Osiris realizes the Guardian is the key to stopping the Vex. Panoptes notices the Guardians, so Osiris distracts the Vex so that the Guardian can escape. Not sure how to stop Panoptes, the Guardian consults Ikora, who sends them to the Io Pyramidion to find a map of the Infinite Forest. While exploring the Pyramidion, Sagira and Ikora have a conversation about Ikora's role in exiling Osiris from the last city. Ikora says that losing the light has changed her and she wants to make amends with her former mentor. Sagira doesn't find the map she was looking for, but instead discovers the coordinates of a map of the Infinite Forest that's inside the Infinite Forest. Upon returning to Mercury, the Guardian is sent into a combat simulation of the Red Legion invading the planet during the Red War. Sagira finds the map but can't locate Panoptes because she lacks the necessary processing power. The Guardian next travels to Nessus to use a Vex mind to process the map and locate Panoptes. The Vex mind shorts out and fails to find Panoptes, so Ikora has the idea to find Panoptes' code before their creation in the past of the Infinite Forest, and then use it to find Panoptes' location in the present. The Guardian returns to the forest yet again, where they fight the Dendron root mine that created Panoptes. This allows them to get the code, which they use to find Panoptes' final coordinates at the moment they wipe out all life in the solar system. Panoptes intervenes before the Guardian can act upon the new information, injuring Sagira and ejecting the Guardian from the Infinite Forest. The Guardian is unable to re-enter the forest, so Ikora comes and helps use her light to hold the portal open so the Guardian can enter and kill Panoptes. The Guardian and Osiris work together, defeating Panoptes and putting an end to their domination of the Infinite Forest, averting the destruction of the solar system. Ikora and Osiris reconcile, and Ikora tells him he's welcome back in the last city. However, Osiris declines, instead deciding to try and fight the Vex in the Infinite Forest, preventing them from regaining control after Panoptes' defeat. In terms of quality, Curse of Osiris gets a bit of a bad rap because of the state Destiny 2 was in at the time it released. It was always going to be a smaller mid-year expansion like The Dark Below or House of Wolves, so Curse of Osiris being a short 2.5 hour experience isn't that bad in my opinion. Doing the campaign after adventures didn't completely destroy the narrative, but it is a bit strange to be roaming the Infinite Forest without a care in the world before killing Panoptes. I definitely think the player should have been locked out of Mercury in a new light until they completed the campaign for narrative reasons, and they should also have been required to complete the Red War first. Ultimately, I think a big reason Curse of Osiris wasn't looked fondly upon by the player base was the poor health of Destiny 2 at the time, and the fact that it does feel like a bit of a retread of the Red War, as it's yet another story where we're trying to stop a villain from controlling the light and destroying the sun. I understand why the writers made that choice. They likely wanted to connect it to the story of of the Red War, but it probably would have been better if the Vex's plan wasn't so similar to Gaul's. The Vex could have established dominance of the system without the destruction of the sun, and in fact, destroying the star would prevent them from extracting other resources from the system, which feels out of character for the Vex. The sun was likely chosen because its destruction is a quick visual shorthand for the apocalypse. However, it would have been more interesting if we were shown a timeline where the Vex controlled Earth and had converted it into something resembling Nessus or Mercury. It would still keep the existential threat easy to visualize without so thoroughly retreading the concept of the Almighty. I enjoy the time travel narrative and like how the campaign involves visiting Vex locations throughout the solar system to acquire new information. It does have an awful lot of missions that feel like wheel spinning in the middle, where we try to get Panoptes' location but are repetitively blocked from finding the answer. It feels a bit like filler to pad out the mission count to 8 rather than crafting a tighter, more narratively satisfying experience. I think Curse of Osiris is ultimately decent, but a bit mid story-wise. Warmind opens with a cutscene where Zavala explains that the awakening of the Traveler caused more enemies to stir and take notice of humanity and the Guardians. Anna Bray investigates her past before she was a Guardian on Mars at a Golden Age era Warmind facility. The ice caps are melting thanks to the Traveler reawakening, which causes an army of Hive, frozen since the Golden Age, to stir. As the Guardian investigates a distress call from Anna, Ghost explains to players that Mars is the first place humanity made contact with the Traveler. This gives important backstory for anyone who didn't play Destiny 1 and see the amazing Mars intro cutscene. Anna and the Guardian fight through the Hive and investigate the Warmind facility. Before they can speak to the Warmind Rasputin, Zavala arrives and is angry. Because of the death of the Iron Lords at the hands of Rasputin in Rise of Iron, Zavala is afraid of Rasputin's power. He tries to stop Anna from making contact with him. Zavala is angry that Anna wasn't involved in the Red War because she was trying to find a way to contact the Warmind and reawaken him on Mars to stop Gaul. Zavala acts like a disappointed father and Anna is his defiant daughter. Zavala is kind of rude in this scene because he fails to recognize that Anna was dealing with grief in her own way, just like he was on Titan. Zavala fails to recognize the role the trauma of losing his friends to Siva is playing in his judgment, causing him to be incredibly harsh to Anna. She wants to form an alliance with Rasputin rather than treating him like a dangerous weapon. She knows Rasputin better than anyone because during the Golden Age she worked with him and tried to help him become a person instead of a weapon. Zavala also is angry at Anna for investigating her past, which I think is a bit toxic. Most Guardians have nothing to go off of, so they're blank slates that the Traveler and Vanguard are easily able to manipulate into soldiers. Anna knows her identity because she awoke with an ID card from the Clovis Bray Corporation on her person. It's only natural she would want to learn about her past and try to use it to help the Vanguard. She has good leads. Most Guardians want to know their past from before they were risen, but almost nobody has that opportunity. Trying to punish Anna and prevent her from taking this opportunity to learn about her roots is a very dystopian move and makes the Vanguard and Zavala seem like villains. I really dislike the way Zavala behaves in Warmind. Before Anna can show Zavala her connection to Rasputin, a loud noise distracts them. Zol, one of the Hive worm gods, has reawoken from beneath the ice and plans to capture the Warmind. The Guardian tries to confront Zol, but he overpowers and disorients them. Zol is an incredibly imposing monster with a super deep voice that feels powerful and intimidating. I absolutely love the cutscene where you see him for the first time and he tells the Guardian to drown in the deep. It establishes Zol as a very threatening presence. There's something horrifying about watching a giant worm slither through the ice. Zol heads directly to the Rasputin facility to take control of the Warmind. The Guardian follows him and uses the javelin from the Warmind vault to fight Zol directly during the final boss fight of the campaign. I quite liked the fight and think it works well. Confronting Zol and dealing with Rasputin represents reckoning with your past, particularly Anna's past. She's able to take both the traumatic and beautiful parts, reconciling them, allowing herself to move forward, which is a good message. In the ending cutscene, the Guardian, Anna, and Zavala talk to Rasputin, who says he wants to become more than a primitive weapon and wants to choose his own destiny. This drives home the central idea of Warmind, which is about Rasputin being not just a tool but also a person. He wants to interact with the world in a far more substantial way than just violence. He has the capacity for more and wants the Vanguard to recognize this. It's ironic that Rasputin chooses this path because the Guardian doesn't. The main way they interact with the world in Destiny is through violence. Because Destiny is a first-person shooter and the Guardian is the player character, they function as a primitive weapon who lacks the same agency Rasputin has, which makes him feel more human than the Guardian. I remember wondering why Warmind was so short after I finished it. Compared to Curse of Osiris and the Red War, Warmind is incredibly short, containing only 5 missions and a total runtime of an hour and a half. I still think the story is pretty good, and the campaign, while short, contains no filler and delivers a great experience. The only thing I disliked was Zavala's characterization in the expansion. Otherwise, Warmind was a great expansion on par with Rise of Iron. Ultimately, I remember really enjoying my time with Destiny 2 in 2019, and I wanted to experience more of the game's content, particularly the Leviathan raid. However, I didn't have friends willing to help a new light learn the game, so I ended up not ever getting to endgame content and having a choice to take my experience further. I ended up forgetting about Destiny shortly afterwards due to some circumstances in my personal life around the time. I wouldn't return until 2022 during the year of Witch Queen. The final thing I do in my gameplay footage is open the Destiny 2 store and hover over Forsaken. I contemplated purchasing the expansion to play the campaign, as up until that point everything I had played was free. I ultimately decided not to purchase Forsaken, which is something I regret as the campaign was removed from the game in the 3 years before I returned. For me, the Forsaken campaign is truly the Destiny 2 that I can never play, and I'm saddened because from what I've heard it sounds amazing. If you're like me and have taken many breaks from Destiny over the years and missed out on some of the game's content, I'm curious to hear what you actually played and what you missed. I also would like to know if you agree with my assessment of the Destiny 2 Year 1 content, or do you disagree? Make sure to let me know in the comments. I'm eforme, and I would like to thank you for watching.